Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today, we're going to talk about the latest gaffe made by Joe Biden. Now, I know that you're thinking right off the bat, a Joe Biden gaffe. Well, it's been a week, so which one of the dozen are we going to choose from? And it's a great question. However, this is, I think, the most important one because I don't like talking about Joe Biden's gaffes because and I'm not picking on Joe Biden when I say this. I honestly think that there is some cognitive decline happening in Joe Biden right now, and it's unfortunate to watch. I have never been a person who has been overly critical of Joe Biden. I've always liked Joe Biden. Everyone in the Senate says the same thing about him. He is a nice guy. He's always seemed like a nice guy. He's never seemed like a bad person. I have no problems with Joe Biden. However, it is sad watching him stumble through every interview that he gives, forgetting where he's at in sentences, all this different stuff. It's sad. So talking about his gaffes is something that doesn't interest me overly much. However, this one is an important one, and I want to talk about it for reasons that will be clear in just a moment. So this past week, Joe Biden was on The Breakfast Club, and he was talking with Charlemagne. For those of you who aren't familiar with The Breakfast Club, which I'm sure could potentially be a lot of people, it's a pretty popular show. It's very popular in the black community. They host a lot of rappers, political figures. They host a little bit of everyone, but it's very much a show that's popular in the black community. So Joe Biden goes on this show, and Charlemagne, for those who are unfamiliar with The Breakfast Club, has a reputation as being kind of an ass. It's his thing. He's contentious. He's critical. He pushes back on people. He's not a very hospitable host, if you will. And that's his reputation. And I think he likes that reputation. So I think he's cultivated exactly the image that he enjoys having. Joe Biden and Charlemagne talked for about 18 minutes. That's how long the interview went. And right at the end, Charlemagne was saying how you need to come on the show. We've got a bunch of questions still. I want to make sure that you're going to be giving things to the black community. And this is what Biden said. This is where the controversy lies. Biden said, and this is the quote, "Well, I tell you what, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black," end quote. So, obviously not a good look. But just an off-the-cuff remark. I will say this right from the beginning. Joe Biden is not a racist. Anyone who's saying that this is evidence of Joe Biden being a racist, they're not being honest, or they're really, really having a bad misread on this statement. However, that statement in and of itself, if you don't know whether you're for me or Trump, you ain't black. That is actually a statement that is not really a gaffe at this point. And what do I mean by that? Well, Joe Biden was quick to walk it back. He said he was being a little cavalier and he was saying it in jest, and he shouldn't have been so laid back with his answer. It's kind of a paraphrase, but he did use the words cavalier. He said he shouldn't have been so cavalier and he shouldn't have been such a wise ass. And okay, that's fine. Joe Biden, you're not a racist. No one thinks Joe Biden's a racist. However, that's because most people don't think about racism and prejudice as the same thing. And prejudice is just a form of racism some of the times. Now, this type of prejudice is actually fundamental to the Democratic Party today. Now, you're not allowed to say it in an overt fashion, but it is there nonetheless. And Joe Biden came on there and he defended his record on race, which I honestly think is not a bad one. There may have been some problems with the 1994 crime bill. However, I think he should stand up and support it. The 90s were a different time. You can't use something 26 years later and say, look, here are some negative outcomes that happened to this bill, when you're talking about a crime explosion in the 90s that needed to be fought. And you're talking about the black community, leaders from the black community supported the bill in 1994. You don't get to walk it back now because it had negative, unforeseen consequences. Anyway, the point is, Joe Biden has been pretty good. He's pretty good when it comes to race relations. You know, the man's got some street cred. The black voters tend to love him. So I don't, again, not a racist, but this ideology that he's talking about, that he overtly stated, it is present in the Democratic Party, and it is present in a big way. That's why I say anymore, the Democratic Party is the racist party in our political system. People don't see that because it's drilled into your head that that is not the case, that it's the Republican Party that is racist. Well, here we go. The Republican Party is home to your overt, out-and-out racists. So if you're not going to find, in my opinion, I actually don't have some data right in front of me to back this up, but my opinion is probably that you're not going to find a lot of Ku Klux Klan members who are voting Democrat. Not anymore. Not today. And you're not going to find a lot of people with neo-Nazi sympathies that are voting Democrat. Not today. So you are overt racists. Those people in the white hoods, those assholes with the swastika tattoos, they probably vote Republican if they vote at all, which they might not. However, those people account for such a small fraction of the Republican Party, they wield no power. They have no say. And when the Republican Party finds someone in prominence who holds sympathies like that, they out them and they strip them of their committee titles and they kick them out of Congress. What was the name of that guy recently? Steve King, I think is his name. Might have to check myself on that. But the guy from Congress who said, what's the problem with white nationalism? Immediately the Republican Party disowned him in a hard fashion. So my point is that the Republican Party might have those people, those out and out racists, the scum of society, the bigots, but they're not Republican Party mainstream. They don't represent any significant proportion of the Republican Party. Now flip that around on the Democrats. And some people are at home saying, well, what are you talking about? The Democratic Party is the racist party. The Democratic Party holds these beliefs that Joe Biden said, they're interwoven in the Democratic Party platform. This idea that race is the most important thing in the world. If Republicans had it their way, we wouldn't be talking about race every day. We wouldn't talk about race at all. But the conversation that the Democrats want to have every day is about race. And that's fine. It's a fine conversation that needs to be had. The history of the United States is one that's filled with repression and racism. And there's conversations to be had about some of the ways that these things need to be changed and tweaked. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fact that the Democratic Party puts people in boxes and expects them to behave a certain way according to their race. They also disenfranchise voices that don't meet certain criteria. So the easiest example of this is take a look at black Republicans. How quick are people willing to disparage black Republicans for being Republican? Rob Smith, who's a prominent up-and-coming conservative voice, is a young black Republican. He said he never personally experienced racism until he came out as conservative. And then he said, you'll watch the people who are the most quote-unquote woke, the progressive lefties, they will say the most debasing things to black conservatives, and they will never think twice about it. You'll have white liberals saying that a black conservative is an Uncle Tom or a sellout or a house, and they won't think anything of it because they're saying, oh, that person's not really black, they're Republican. And to be black means to be Democrat. Well, congratulations. That's a prejudicial view that you have just outed yourself as having. If you think someone should behave a certain way based on their race, guess what? That's prejudice and kind of racist. I don't know if you know that, but when you think someone should behave a certain way according to their race, not a good thing. That's kind of what we're supposed to be against as a society. But white liberals do this all the time. They do it all the time. It's part of the platform of intersectionality, that people are going to behave a certain way according to their race. And you'll watch this groups that are supposed to celebrate blacks or gays or things like that, they won't invite black conservatives to speak. They won't invite gay conservatives to speak. So a organization like the NAACP, they won't have a conservative keynote speaker come up there because what they actually represent are not black people. What they represent are progressive ideology when it comes to black people. And you could point to any number of groups that do the exact same thing where they're not for minorities. They're for minorities who think a certain way. White liberals are not for minorities. White liberals are for minorities who think a certain way. And it's gross and it's not right. And if you have ever thought negatively about a black conservative or a gay Republican, then you need to check your prejudice, because it is actually not okay to have those thoughts. And I used to think nothing of this, by the way. It never occurred to me how wrong that was until I heard a black conservative talk about it. And I said, oh, I have clearly never given this any more than a second thought. I used to listen to Dan Savage. Dan Savage, for those who don't know, Dan Savage he's an author, columnist. He writes a sex advice column. He talks about politics. He's an interesting guy, and I like some of his work. He can be very nasty about certain things, and I used to listen to him talk about the Log Cabin Republicans. The Log Cabin Republicans are a gay organization that is for Republicans. And I used to listen to him talk about them and how they were evil and not really gay and all these different things. And I used to laugh and think nothing of it. And now anymore I say, oh, that's because he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand that that's not an appropriate response to people who disagree with you. To say you're no longer black because you don't believe in X, Y, and Z. You're no longer gay because you don't believe in X, Y, and Z. Forget if you're married to a man. You're not really gay. You're not really black. I don't care if you have to go through the same hurdles as everyone else who might share your skin tone. You're not really black because you obviously don't understand what it means to be black, or you'd be a Democrat. That's a terrible philosophy. It's a terrible way to live your life. And it is innate in intersectionality, which is at the heart of progressivism today in the United States. So this gaffe by Joe Biden, it's not really a gaffe. This is how large swaths of the Democratic Party believe today. This is what they believe. And it's an issue. And again, anyone who's ever thought about that for more than 5 seconds will realize, oh, that's not appropriate. Listen to someone like Jason Riley talk about how mean white liberals are to him and how the comfortability they have with throwing racial epithets towards him. And you'll realize exactly what I'm talking about. The most woke, progressive people on the planet can be the most vile when it comes to thinking that all black people should behave a certain way. And that's the most obvious example. People like Jason Riley or Thomas Sowell or Larry Elder, Ram Smith, any of these, you look at a guy like Ben Carson. How many people disparage Ben Carson as being not really black because he's in Donald Trump's administration? You could see it. Could see it on the mainstream media, and people wouldn't think anything of it. Kanye West isn't black anymore because he wears a MAGA hat. No, people, it's not. It doesn't work that way, and we all need to get out of this mindset. It's ugly and it's gross, and it really, you should treat everyone as an individual. And the Democratic Party themselves, Joe Biden had to say this week, he doesn't take the African American vote for granted. Bullshit. Bullshit, the Democratic Party doesn't do that. They absolutely do. They know that no matter what they do, 90 to 95% of all the black people in this country are going to vote Democrat. It doesn't matter what happens. They're going to vote Democrat. And when Donald Trump came out 4 years ago and he said, you should vote for me, what do you have to lose? I think it resonated with some people because they realized that the Democratic policies, which seem to help the poor and minority communities, they haven't been helping. And all of the cities in the country, all the major urban centers in the country have been run by Democrats for years and years and years. And there are still ghettos. There's still poverty. There's still giant problems that are happening in the black community. And politicians are not going to be the ones to solve it. And that's where maybe looking at Republicans, maybe looking at libertarians comes into play. If you realize the government's not going to solve your problem, that the Democrat that you're voting for who promises to fix your neighborhood, he's not going to be the one to do it. Maybe we can start some positive change in communities that need help. The way to do that is to empower people, not to empower politicians, not to give the government more power over your life. The government created the ghettos. It's not anyone else. No one else did it. It was the government. It was corporations. It was redlining from the banks. These things created the ghettos. And the civil rights movement didn't rely on the government to do it. They relied on the people to get out in the streets, to make change, and then force the government to do it. They didn't just sit back and say, well, let's elect a good Democrat and he'll fix the problem. They said, no, we elect politicians who are going to support our causes, but it's going to be up to us to do it. The Million Man March happened in Washington, D.C. The people, the leaders of the civil rights movement fought every single day with members of the community to make positive changes, but it wasn't government first, it was people first. And that's an important distinction because the people are the only one who can affect change in communities. And the Democrats don't think that way. They want government to be the daddy of everyone. You know, he's out there, he's going to give you the allowance. He's going to fix your messes. He's going to be the one who pats you on the back and tells you you're doing a good job. It's not the government's job. It's not the government's role, but that's what the Democrats want. And if you're black and you don't agree with them, well, then it must mean you're not black. It's a terrible way to think about the world. It's a terrible way to treat people. In summation, everyone, just get out of that mindset. If you have it, don't think like that. Everyone in this country, everyone in the world is an individual and should be treated as such. If I line up 5 white men behind a sheet and you just see the silhouetted outline of their body, and I tell you, what can you tell me about these people? You can tell me that they're white. You can tell me nothing else. You don't know if they're gay. You don't know if they're straight. You don't know if they're happy or depressed. You don't know if they've lived a life of privilege or a life of struggle. You don't know what their income is. You don't know their education level. You don't know these things. And to make assumptions based on skin color is not okay. You could do it with anyone. If I line up 5 black people behind a curtain, what can you tell me about them? You cannot tell me anything. And you shouldn't be able to. The fact that I can say they probably all vote Democrat is not a good thing. Because that means you're not thinking for yourself. I'm not a Republican. Okay? I'm not. I voted Democrat my entire life. I don't like when the Democratic Party treats people like a monolith. Like they're one conglomerate that can be treated as, oh, black people are black, you're black, therefore you're this. It doesn't mean anything. And we have to get out of that mindset. And people like Joe Biden, they're not going to be the ones to do it. Because he doesn't see anything wrong. Because he knows. He's a smart guy. He knows that it doesn't matter what he does. He can take the African American vote for granted. He says he won't, but he can. The Democratic Party just thinks it's in the bag. They're not out there really appealing to black voters. Not in the way that they should. They're not out there advocating for real things that can do to change because they know. that it's not going to be, they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be the ones to change it. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the day. Everyone, just think for yourselves. Be conscious of the fact that other people aren't always going to look out for your well-being, and the government is not going to be there to fix your messes. Take responsibility for your life. We don't all start the same. There is a problem in the system. There is inequality in the system. We all have to overcome our own obstacles. Don't rely or look around for the handout that's going to change your life. Make the changes yourself. You can do it. Anyone can. It can be done. We're going to leave it there for the day. Everyone, I hope you have a fantastic day. I'm Tyler Chrestman, signing out.